Hi everyone, we're here on behalf of UofT Housing Services. My name is Yue and I am your Student Life Officer at Housing Services.
And my name is Meg, and I am your peer advisor at Housing Services.
So today we're going to cover 5 questions that we're commonly asked regarding housing in Toronto.
But first, what is Housing Services? We educate students about renting in Toronto. We offer search tips and strategies to help students navigate their off-campus housing options, which is what we are doing today. We also connect students to property listings through our off-campus housing finder, and we educate students about their tenant rights and responsibilities.
But one good thing to note is that we're not realtors, so we can't do individual housing searches on behalf of students. We're also not lawyers, so we cannot interpret the law on behalf of our students, but we're always happy to refer you to legal aid and resources if needed. So to start us off, the biggest question we always get is when should I begin begin searching for housing?
We get a lot of students contact us at the end of the academic year who are already looking for a place to live in September, and they are worried that they are already late in beginning their search, when in fact they're actually way too early. We recommend starting to look for a unit 44 to 60 days before you want to move in. The reason for this is that in Ontario, tenants owe their landlord 60 days written notice before moving out. So a lot of landlords only find out their unit will become available 2 months before. It is extremely uncommon for a landlord to advertise much more than that. Most leases begin on the first of the month. So if you're thinking about moving in on September 1st, you can expect most rentals to appear in early July, with many still posted throughout the month of August. This does not apply to independent student residence buildings, which we'll talk about in a bit. These buildings begin their application process months in advance. And if you are considering one of these buildings, I recommend beginning the application process as soon as you can, as they tend to fill up fast. And this leads me to my next question. What do you recommend for new students or students who have never rented before, Yue?
Thank you, Meg, for the question. So if you have never rented before, you have never lived away from home, or if you're new to the area, the process of renting can seem a little overwhelming. It's even stressful for people who have rental experience, but there are some options that can make the process a little less daunting. First, the easiest option if you will be living alone, that means without a partner, pet, or children, is to consider an off-campus independent student housing building. So most of you here may be familiar with on-campus residence, but there are also independent off-campus student housing buildings that the university does not own or operate. So these buildings, they typically rent to students and they aim to offer a residence-like experience, which means they streamline costs and also offering events and activities. This option is great for students with no prior rental history, and it can even be a great stepping stone into the Toronto rental market, as they often take international guarantors and references. You can use this time living in independent student residence to start building up your Canadian credit history and to strengthen your rental portfolio. But of course, residence isn't for everyone. So you may still want to search for an off-campus unit. If you have never rented before, you may consider using the service of a realtor. Working with a realtor can be an easy way to search because it's a free service for renters. But do please keep in mind that realtors will only be able to find properties that are average market price, so you will need to have the budget accommodate. And speaking of budget, I have a question for Meg. What should I budget for?
Thanks, Yue. So when you're thinking about budgeting, it's good to remember that you will have fixed costs like your rent and variable costs like hydro and grocery bills. According to a report released by the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation in 2024, the average rent for a two-bedroom unit in a purpose-built rentals in Toronto is $1,963. Units in condominium apartments tend to be more expensive, with an average of 2,918 for two-bedroom units. Estimated expenses for living in the Greater Toronto Area are posted on our website, and it includes the average prices of hydro, which is your electricity bill, as well as internet, phone, transportation, and more. Remember to use the U of T planning calculator to help you set up a monthly budget. We also have a page that outlines the average rental cost in Toronto, but in summary, the average housing cost for students can be anywhere between $1,100 to $2,700 a month, depending on several factors such as are you living alone? How many roommates do you have? What kind of accommodation do you have? Where are you located, etc. Essentially, living alone does come at a premium. So many of our students choose to live with a few or even several roommates in order to lower the cost of rent. Also, living farther away from the downtown core can be cheaper, though you have to take into consideration the cost of commuting. Something else that we always recommend adding to your budget is tenants insurance, which is around $15 to $30 a month. There are three reasons for getting tenants insurance. Firstly, it protects your personal property, like say a random pipe burst and your laptop, phone, and bed get ruined, then your landlord's insurance will likely not cover that. It will cover the replacement of the wall, but not your belongings. Secondly, most policies cover personal liability, which is your responsibility for accidents or negligence. For example, if you got distracted while cooking and you set your stove on fire, your landlord will expect you to pay for the repairs. If you don't have tenant insurance, you or whoever is financially responsible for you will have to pay, and often the prices are in the thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars. Third, tenant's insurance may cover living expenses. So if you leave your unit for any reason, like a fire, flood, fumigation, those with insurance would be able to receive financial support to transition into other housing, like say a hotel, an Airbnb, or another rental until they can return to their unit. But enough about budgeting and on to the rental process. So, Yue, where should I search for rentals?
So we always recommend starting with our U of T off-campus housing finder. This is where landlords from all across the Greater Toronto area will contact us and let us know that they will have a room, an apartment, or even a whole house available to rent. These landlords are typically looking for students to rent their units, so they may be more understanding of a lack of rental history, or they may be more accepting for international applicants. Our team also reviews every listing before it is posted to make sure everything looks okay and that attendance rights within Ontario are being met. But we still encourage you to treat any listings that you see online as it could be a potential scam and seek to verify that it's legitimate before handing over any personal information or money. But of course, we don't get all the listings available in Toronto, so many students will also use their other rental platforms. Some popular options are PadMapper, Viewit.ca, Zillow, Places for Students, condos.ca or Realtor.ca, and Facebook groups. It's good to know that the university doesn't have an official Facebook group, but it is a good place to search for a place or to find roommates. Though do keep in mind that scammers can still post on these groups. Which leads me to a question. How do I avoid rental scams?
So, scams are unfortunately very real in the online housing world, and they exist in every major city, including Toronto. We hope to equip you with some key knowledge to prevent getting scammed. First, we have very in-depth page on our website that details the different types of scams and how to avoid them. So I recommend taking a look before beginning your search. But some quick tips are verify a property by doing a Google search of the address as well as the landlord's name and email. Does a real property show up? Does the picture match the Google Street View image? Does the landlord's name beside the word scam show up? Keep your cash close, which means not paying anything until you have to. In Ontario, landlords may only legally ask for an advance deposit of 1 month's rent to be applied as the last month's rent deposit and a refundable key deposit, which is the amount it would cost to replace the key that should be refunded to you when you move out. It's important to only pay this money at the time of signing a lease. If you are signing a lease and will be moving in soon, the landlord will likely ask you to pay first and last month's rent. Now, even if you are an international student, if your unit is under what's called the Residential Tenancies Act, meaning that you do not share a kitchen or bathroom with your landlord or their immediate family, a landlord is not legally allowed to ask you to pay more than the last month's rent up front. You can offer, but you are not legally obligated to do so. Also, keep in mind that cleaning fees, application fees, security and damage deposits, and holding fees are not legal. It is important to understand the market. If you see a private $900 condo on Bay Street, unfortunately, it's probably a scam. Some neighborhoods outside of Toronto are less expensive. Be sure to do your own research to find out what's the average cost in the area. But if something seems too good to be true, it probably isn't real. Ask the landlord why they are offering a discount. It's important to keep your guard up and have the landlord prove to you that it's a real unit and they own it before you hand over any personal info or money. Remember, you should only be paying money at the time of signing a lease. Also, the best way to avoid a scam is to view the apartment in person. If you're not in Toronto at the time, have someone view the unit on your behalf or do what's called a live virtual viewing of the unit. A bonus question I'll include for how common is it? Sorry, what should I prepare for? Sorry, in my rental application, Yue.
Thanks, Meg. So landlords will likely ask you to submit a rental application, which is a package of information that helps them assess whether you are going to be a reliable tenant to have. It is very important the landlord only assess based on valid factors, such as credit history and also demonstrated ability to pay rent, but not on discriminatory factors such as your age, race, religion, or sexual orientation. It is very critical that you can communicate your plan to pay rent to a landlord, whether this is from your own employment income, savings, or the support of a guarantor. If you do not have your own employment income or enough savings to cover your rent, you can consider using a guarantor. This is the standard expectations that landlords have for full-time undergraduate students. A guarantor is specified in your lease, and they assume financial responsibilities for you if you are unable to pay your monthly rent on time. A guarantor can be a parent or an older sibling. So this person who agrees to be your guarantor, they may agree to pay in the event that you don't, or they may just pay your full rent on behalf of you. Typically, a landlord will ask for someone who has a Canadian credit score and working history to prove that they can take financial responsibilities for a rental unit. A landlord will also seek a Canadian credit report or a credit score, which is a measure of your financial reliability. They will expect this of you or your guarantor. So a credit score can range from 300 to 900, with 300 at the bottom and 900 being a perfect score. Typically, you will need to have at least 700 points to be considered to have good credit in Toronto. If you don't have a guarantor, you need to have a solid plan to pay rent. You wanted to make sure you can articulate your plan in a very convincing way. So that means having a supporting letter, a letter from your job or your credit report, and if you receive scholarship, a documentation for that. For the job letter, the landlord wants to know that you're making enough to pay your bills. And if they want the guarantor's job letter, they wanted to know the guarantor can cover their own expenses in addition to yours. In a rental application, you will also need to prepare funds for the first and last month of rent. You just need to have that money available in your bank account once the lease is signed, but you shouldn't pay the first and last month's rent before you're required to. You will also likely need references. Ideally, your reference will be a former landlord, or if you lived in a residence before, a former residence admin. However, your reference could also be a supervisor at work, a teacher, a volunteer leader that you have worked before, who can speak on your behalf and speak to your character as a reliable and responsible individual, who will be a good tenant to have. Also, government photo ID and also previous addresses are pretty standard to be included in a rental application. But this is just a brief overview of the Toronto rental markets. If you want to learn more about the rental process, how to set up viewings, how to avoid scams, what your tenants' rights look like in Ontario. We have programming workshops throughout the summer that walk you through the steps of renting. Also, for anybody who is in Toronto this month, on July 19th, Saturday, we will be having our in-person housing fair, which will have independent student residences, property companies, and individual landlords who are looking to interact with students to find potential tenants. We would love to see you there, and you can register for this event on Folio. Thank you.
Thanks.